When I first met Olivia, I thought I had found the perfect partner. She was everything I had ever wanted, sharp-witted, ambitious, and confident. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming party, where she stood out effortlessly, commanding attention with her humor and charm. I was drawn to her instantly. Our relationship moved fast, but it felt right. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. We traveled together, spent weekends lost in deep conversations, and even adopted a dog, something I had always wanted but never took the leap to do. After 2 years, I proposed and she said yes. I truly believed she was the one. My family seemed to like her well enough, or so I thought. There were small comments here and there, things I brushed off at the time. My sister once said, "Olivia knows what she wants, huh?" in a tone that wasn't exactly approving. My mom, in her gentle way, mentioned, "She's got strong opinions, but as long as she makes you happy, that's what matters." I laughed it off. They just didn't know her like I did. Money had always been a small point of tension between us. Olivia grew up in a family that struggled financially, while I was raised in a more stable, middle-class household. My father worked hard his entire life to make sure we never went without. He wasn't a millionaire, but he provided for us, and when he passed away 2 years ago, he left behind enough to settle some debts and help my mother retire comfortably. Losing him was the hardest thing I had ever experienced. I thought Olivia understood that. I thought she respected his memory. I was wrong. Before we dive in, please like this video and let us know in the comments what is your favorite movie. Your encouragement keeps these inspiring tales coming. Now let's get started. The anniversary of my father's passing was always an emotional day for my family. This year we decided to hold a small gathering at my mother's house, a quiet evening filled with stories, laughter, and memories of the man who had shaped our lives. It wasn't a formal event, just close family and a few family friends who had known him well. I asked Olivia to come along. She was my fiancée, practically family already, and I wanted her to feel included. Looking back, I wish I hadn't. At first, the evening went well. My siblings and I swapped stories about our childhood, recalling the little things that made our dad special. The way he used to sing terribly off-key in the car. How he always insisted on making pancakes every Sunday morning, even though he was awful at cooking. The time he drove 2 hours just to bring me my forgotten backpack in college. People laughed, sharing their own stories. But Olivia seemed detached. She wasn't rude exactly, just distant. She sat next to me sipping her wine, not really engaging. I assumed she was just nervous. Then, as my brother told a story about how Dad used to sneak us extra dessert when Mom wasn't looking, Olivia leaned over to me and whispered, "It's nice that everyone has these sweet stories. I just wish he had left you all a little better set up for the future, you know?" I froze. What? I turned to her, keeping my voice low. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "I mean, he sounds like a great guy, but if he worked so hard, shouldn't he have left more behind? You work your ass off, but it doesn't seem like you have much to show for it." I didn't even know how to respond. My father had done everything for us, and here she was, questioning his legacy at an event meant to honor his memory. I told myself she didn't mean it the way it sounded. I let it go. I shouldn't have. The evening took a turn for the worse as the celebration continued. What started as a tribute to my late father's memory quickly spiraled into a series of increasingly jarring moments. As my siblings and I reminisced about the small, loving gestures of our childhood, Olivia's behavior became hard to ignore. During a particularly animated retelling of our dad's impromptu adventures on family vacations, she interrupted with a seemingly offhand remark that cut through the warm nostalgia like a cold wind. "What, were you really expecting him to save every penny for you?" she said, her tone laced with a dismissive edge. The comment hung in the air, jarring everyone into a stunned silence. I could feel my heart pounding as the room's atmosphere shifted from affectionate reminiscence to uncomfortable tension. My sister's eyes met mine, a silent exchange of disbelief and hurt passing between us. I tried to dismiss the remark as a fluke, attributing it to nerves or a misplaced attempt at humor. But as the evening wore on, Olivia's comments grew increasingly audacious. When my mother began to speak about my father's countless acts of kindness, stories of how he would spend his weekends volunteering at the local shelter and helping neighbors in need, Olivia leaned back in her chair and, with a hint of sarcasm in her voice, interjected, "It's all well and good to be generous, but wouldn't it have been better if he had thought a little more about his own family's future?" That comment was the final blow. I could see the hurt in my mother's eyes and the shock on my siblings' faces. The room, once filled with warmth and love, fell eerily silent. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief rise within me. This was no longer a harmless observation, but a calculated slight against the very memory of the man who had raised me with such care and dedication. Unable to contain my emotions any longer, I stood up, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and sorrow. "Olivia, what you just said is not acceptable," I exclaimed, my tone rising above the murmurs of the shocked guests. "You're not just making a comment about finances, you're disrespecting my father's legacy and everything he stood for." Her expression remained indifferent, as if the gravity of her words had no impact on her. The gap between us widened in that painful moment, a moment when I realized that the woman I thought I knew was revealing a side that could never be reconciled with the values I held dear. After that explosive moment, the mood of the evening shifted irreversibly. The silence that followed my outburst was thick with disbelief and hurt. I could feel the weight of every unspoken word as family members exchanged anxious glances. The once cozy room now felt suffocating, as if the warmth had been drained away by the tension that hung in the air. I could see the pained expression on my mother's face, and my younger brother looked as though he was about to say something in protest, but no one dared to break the silence. Olivia, seated at the table, seemed entirely unruffled. Instead of the expected shock or remorse, she maintained a composed, almost detached demeanor. When the conversation resumed, it was in low, hesitant murmurs about something else entirely, anything to avoid confronting the issue at hand. I tried to salvage the remaining moments of the evening by urging everyone to focus on celebrating my father's life, but the damage was done. Every shared memory was now tainted by the sting of her remarks. I pulled Olivia aside briefly, hoping to understand her behavior, to find a hint of remorse or explanation behind her words. In a hushed tone I asked, "Olivia, why are you doing this? What's gotten into you tonight?" Her response was a mere shrug and a quiet, "I'm just being realistic," as if there were no consequences to belittling the memory of the man who meant so much to us all. I could feel the anger rising but also a deep sense of betrayal. I had believed that she was capable of empathy, that she would understand the sanctity of family traditions and the memories we all cherished. Instead, I saw only a cold indifference that cut deeper than any argument. Throughout the rest of the evening, Olivia retreated into herself, barely engaging with anyone. She sat with her eyes fixed on her phone, as if the digital world could provide some escape from the reality unfolding around her. My siblings and I exchanged troubled looks, silently agreeing that the night had taken a turn from which it might never recover. By the time dessert was served, a special peach cobbler my mother had made with so much love, the room was heavy with unspoken grievances and shattered illusions. It was clear that our family's sacred time to honor my father had been irrevocably marred, leaving behind a bitter taste that I knew would linger for a long time. The drive home was shrouded in silence, a heavy atmosphere of unresolved pain and disillusionment. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal as I sat in the passenger seat, watching the familiar streets pass by with a surreal detachment. Olivia's silence spoke louder than any words. She neither defended herself nor offered any remorse for her cutting remarks, and that inaction only deepened my conviction that things between us had irreversibly changed. When we finally arrived at our apartment, the tension was palpable. I could hardly bring myself to look at her as she nonchalantly dropped her bag onto the couch, her eyes fixed on some distant thought. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation that needed to happen. "Olivia," I began, my voice low and steady, "tonight was unacceptable. The things you said about my father in front of my family, those were not just offhand comments. They were deeply disrespectful." I paused, searching her face for any sign of regret or understanding, but her expression remained impassive. She shrugged, as if the gravity of the situation was an inconvenience rather than a breach of trust. "You're overreacting," she replied coolly, her tone dismissive. "It was just a few comments about practicality. I'm not insulting anyone, I'm just stating what I think." Her words, meant to downplay the hurt, only served to widen the rift between us. I could feel every word slicing through the fragile remnants of our once happy future together. My heart pounded in my chest as I continued, "This isn't about practicality, Olivia. It's about respect, for my father, for my family, and for the values we hold dear. I've been noticing these red flags for a while now, and tonight they all came crashing down. I cannot and will not continue a relationship where the people I love are disrespected. The finality in my tone left no room for negotiation. Without another word, I told her that it was over and that she needed to leave. I asked her to pack her things and be out by the next morning. Her stunned silence in response was more telling than any argument could be. In that moment, I realized that preserving my family's honor and my own integrity was worth far more than clinging to what we once had. As I sat alone in our apartment later that night, the echoes of the evening's hurt and betrayal resounded, solidifying my decision that some lines, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. In the days following that painful night, I tried to find solace in the quiet of my own thoughts, but the doubts and questions kept echoing in my mind. I had convinced myself that the rift between Olivia and me was solely due to her careless, hurtful words at dinner. However, an unexpected phone call from my younger sister Mia shattered any remaining illusions. I answered hesitantly, unsure of what news she might bring. "Hey, I need to talk to you about something important," Mia said, her voice trembling with a mix of concern and urgency. I could tell immediately that something was off. "What is it?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. After a few moments of pause, she began, "I overheard something at one of our recent family gatherings, something I wasn't sure I should say, but now that everything's out in the open, I can't keep quiet." My heart pounded as I urged her to continue. "Tell me everything," I pleaded. Mia's words tumbled out in a rush. "I heard Olivia talking with one of her friends at a dinner party. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I caught fragments of your fiancé's conversation. She said things like, 'Once we're married, I'll make sure you're not wasting all your money on your family. They'll never have the control I need.'" I sat there in stunned silence, processing every word as if they were being carved into my heart. The implication was clear. Olivia had a hidden agenda from the very start. It wasn't just a few offhand comments. She'd been scheming behind our backs, planning to control not only my finances but my entire future. The revelation hit me like a freight train. I felt a surge of betrayal and anger that went far beyond the disrespect at dinner. Every subtle comment, every dismissive shrug, and every moment of cold indifference now aligned into a coherent, painful picture. Mia continued, "It wasn't just about money though. It was about power, about having control over you and your family's resources. She wasn't interested in you, she was interested in what you could provide, and it all makes sense now." I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this newfound truth. The dark undercurrent that I had sensed in Olivia's behavior was not just a series of misinterpreted remarks. It was a calculated strategy to undermine everything I held dear. My mind raced as I replayed every interaction, every word, piecing together a narrative of manipulation and deceit. The person I thought I loved was not only insensitive, but she had been orchestrating a plan that would have left me utterly isolated and financially vulnerable. In that moment, the painful realization crystallized. I had dodged a bullet far larger than I had ever imagined. The person standing before me, cloaked in charm and deceit, had been using every opportunity to erode my trust and manipulate my future. The trust one had once placed in her was shattered beyond repair, and with it, any hope for a shared life built on mutual respect and honesty.